Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. Army National Guard veteran and former Fox News host Pete Hegseth has been on Capitol Hill this week, meeting with senators and trying to sway them and gain their support after his controversial nomination to become the nation's defense secretary by President-elect Donald Trump. Joining us now to talk about the nomination is Senator Tammy Duckworth. She represents Illinois and is also an Army veteran. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I want to start by asking you about Hegseth's comments about women in combat. As recently as November 7th, he said, quote, "I'm straight up saying we should not have women in combat roles." And yet on Monday, he told Sean Hannity that these comments have been, quote, "misconstrued." What is your response to this, Senator?
Well, I think it speaks to his deep, lack of qualifications to be Secretary of Defense. Whether you go with his comments in November, which was very much sweeping, saying that women don't belong in combat. Well, you know what? Our military could not do its job without the 225,000 women who are currently serving in uniform. We would not be combat ready, and we could not truly defend this nation and take the fight to the enemies of America if we did not have the female service members. Now, if you go with his comments recently when he's been equivocating, I think he is saying that, oh, no, he only meant women in special forces, special operators like Green Berets and Navy SEALs and the like. Well, that shows that he's still completely out of touch, because he says that it's because the women meet lower standards than the men, when in fact, the women who are graduating from SEAL school or who are graduating from Ranger school are actually meeting the exact same standards as the men. Again, speaks to the fact that he doesn't know what he's talking about. And this is a guy that we want to be Secretary of Defense, let alone, let's make it clear that he's never commanded a unit larger than a platoon. He was a platoon leader. That's a 40-man unit. And now he wants to be in charge of a 3 million personnel organization with a budget of over $925 billion. We wouldn't, we wouldn't give that job to anybody else that had such few qualifications. Why are we giving it to this guy now?
So are your objections primarily on that leadership experience and the fact that he's never led an organization as large as the Defense Department?
Exactly. He really is not qualified to do the job. He's never commanded a unit in combat. Again, he was a platoon leader, but nothing like a company or larger. He's never done the complex logistics at the brigade or division level. He has not negotiated at that level, an international level, with large, our defense partners. We would not put somebody who had such few qualifications in charge of the DoD, were it not that this was somebody that Donald Trump thinks looks good on TV. That's not who we need to run the DoD. Not someone who looks good on TV. We need someone who knows what they're doing, and Pete Hegseth does not know it.
He has also made comments seemingly opposing quote unquote wokeness in the military. What do you make of that? Are there reforms that need to be made in that regard?
Well, I don't know what he means. And maybe he's talking about some of the training we put into place for sexual assault prevention. I've heard complaints about that, but this is over a decade. We have been fighting issues of military sexual trauma. We had a bipartisan solution. Things are finally getting better. And now he is coming out saying that, he's opposed to a lot of this training. I'm deeply concerned that he's going to roll back the movement that we've made forward to support survivors and victims of military sexual trauma. And again, our military can't go to war without everybody that's serving in uniform today. And frankly, at a time when we've had issues with recruiting, I don't know that having Pete Hegseth in charge of the DoD is going to reassure parents when their children come to them and say, hey, I think I want to enlist.
He's been on the Hill this week. What are you hearing from your GOP colleagues about his nomination and about how they're thinking?
So I'm not hearing anything directly from them, but I am deeply concerned that they are coming under intense political attacks on their side of the aisle. That's not going to be helpful for the path forward in terms of making sure that we have a qualified individual to be Secretary of Defense.
Iowa Senator Joni Ernst signaled on Monday that she would not oppose Pete Hegseth's bid for defense secretary after formerly seemingly like she might be opposed. Have you talked to her at all, or is there anything more that you know about her position there?
I have not spoken to her. I've only seen what I've seen online, which is in the popular media, which is that Donald Trump and his allies are threatening to primary her for her reelection. And I think this is at the point where you decide which is more important, political favors from Donald Trump or the security and safety of the nation.
At this juncture, Senator, do you think, is there any way that Hegseth can get confirmed?
Well, obviously, the way that he would get confirmed is if every Republican senator rolls over and decides to basically do whatever Donald Trump tells them to do, even at the expense of national security.
Reports broke several days ago that the president-elect is considering Florida Governor Ron DeSantis as a potential alternative for defense secretary. What would you make of that change and that alleged potential nomination?
Well, I certainly would want to have a conversation with him, but at least there's someone who's run a budget that it would be something, a large budget, which is a skill that you would need for somebody who would be running the Department of Defense, somebody who's responded to natural disasters. Natural disasters, they've certainly had quite a few in Florida. So I would say that he is, in terms of management experience, far more qualified than Mr. Hegseth, but I've not had a chance to talk with him. He's not been nominated, so we'll have to wait to cross that bridge if that is what Donald Trump decides to do in the future.
What do you think is the number one qualification needed in a potential defense secretary?
I mean, I think first and foremost, it's the ability to run an organization that is that large.
Now, I know you're very busy and we so appreciate your time, but before I let you go, I do want to do a quick lightning round. There have been some other nominations that have been controversial, starting with Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. What do you make of that nomination?
Well, again, she's not qualified to be Director of National Intelligence. She does not have the background within the intelligence community. When she served in Iraq, she was an E4 medical records clerk. That's below the rank of sergeant. It's even below the rank of corporal. She's talked about training foreign military. That was about 3 months she spent in Kuwait, training members of the Kuwaiti, I believe it was the Kuwaiti National Guard. She spent about 90 days doing that. So I don't know what intelligence background she has. And in fact, Russian-controlled media has called her a Russian asset. So I worry that she's, again, someone who's not qualified for the job. And I doubt that unless Donald Trump just hands her one, that she could actually pass a background check in order to be Director of National Intelligence at that very highest level.
What about Kash Patel for FBI?
Again, I think we should be talking about people who have the experience. And Trump loves to brag about only hiring the best people, but then he expects us to ignore that he keeps firing his own people when they do things like follow the law. And frankly, him trying to install Kash Patel in the place of his own handpicked, his own previous FBI director paints a clear picture of how Donald Trump plans to use federal law enforcement to seek retribution against his political enemies, and the Senate should reject him.
And finally, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. What do you make of that nomination?
Well, Marco, I think, is qualified for the position. He's been on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He has the experience. I look forward to sitting down and chatting with my colleague to see what he would do as Secretary of State and where his priorities are. I hope it will be to continue to oppose the Communist Party-controlled PRC government to maintain America's presence around the world. But I do look forward to chatting with Marco because I do think he is actually one of the few nominations that is actually qualified for the job.
We are speaking, of course, in December, and I just want to ask, what is the number one concern on your mind as we head into 2025 and a new presidential administration?
Well, right now, I'm worried about making sure that we pass the defense budget. I worry also about our farmers, our agricultural sector, because we have not yet gotten a farm bill. I'm from Illinois. We're a big corn, soybean, and pork growing state. We grow more pumpkins than anywhere else in the country. And frankly, I worry that we don't have a comprehensive farm bill that needs to be passed. We need to do things like make sure there's crop insurance. We need to make sure that we secure our ag sector. We also have the nation's budget, the debt ceiling. There's a lot to do in the next a couple of months.
There is a lot to do over the next many months. Senator Tammy Duckworth, you will have to come back and give us the updates as they're happening. But for the time being, thank you so, so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.